Parts 1 and 2 of the great affordable 1911 series featured guns from American manufacturers. For Part 3, we're going to compare a pair of guns from Sig Arms. These guns are made in the United States, but Sig Arms is actually a German-owned company. So, are these American 1911s? Well, you get to decide. Welcome to Riders Range, and I want to thank Ann Arbor Arms for their support of Riders Range. Ann Arbor Arms is a 5-star range and training facility with a retail and online store. They can be found at annarborarms.com. Yeah, Sig Sauer entered the 1911 market just shy of a full century after John Browning's pistol design was accepted by the United States Army. So they really haven't been in the 1911 business all that long, although they've made some fine guns far before the 1911s. And there are 1911 purists who will say that the Sig pistols aren't true 1911s because, oh my gosh, they have external extractors, and most Sig 1911s have a slide profile that is just not true to the original design. Of course, that's like saying a Corvette isn't a true Corvette unless it has a straight 6-engine, 2-speed power glide transmission, and a solid rear axle. In this video, I'm not going to pick a winner. Both of these single stack pistols, chambered in 45 ACP, are different in that they're designed for different roles. The Sig Scorpion has a 1913 rail on it, has the PVD flat dark earth finish, has a magwell, and subtle forward cocking serrations, and G10 grips, a straight trigger, and it seems more suited for a police or military role. Whereas the Fastback, with its nice double diamond wood grips, and without any of the combat or tactical features that are characteristic on the Scorpion, seems more suited for a concealed carry gun, particularly with the rounded grip frame on it. Although it's a heavy full-size gun, but I have carried this concealed. It's certainly not first on my list for concealed carry guns, but I have carried it. And I'll note that the straight trigger on the Scorpion is no longer a catalog item for Sig. And as this video goes into production, the only full-size Sig 1911 45s with a straight trigger are the 1911 Select and the Max. And speaking of triggers, neither of these is skeletonized. Both have adjustable over travel stops though. And the Scorpion comes in at 4¼ pounds. It does have, by the way, these guns are completely unloaded and they've been safety checked. So this gun does have some creep. It's definitely got some take up, and you see a little bit of creep right there, but there's no over travel. The reset on this is very nice and short and crisp. I like it. Consistently measures out at 4¼ pounds. The Fastback, on the other hand, and again, it's unloaded, no magazine, nothing in the chamber, consistently breaks at 4 pounds. There's just like the Scorpion, there is take up. There's just a little bit of creep to it, just like the Scorpion. It feels about the same, and hardly any over travel. The reset on this one though is harder to get right to the reset. The trigger spring pushes it farther forward than I would normally like. But it's still a nice trigger, and I don't have any real complaints on it. Hammer profiles on these two guns are a little bit different. The spur is wider on the Fastback, although it doesn't show up that well in the video, and the hammer is somewhat relieved on the Scorpion. As far as the grips, I mentioned that the Fastback has wood double diamond grips that do advertise Sig Sauer on them. The Scorpion has nice G10 grips that are appropriately snakeskin pattern. The front strap is checkered on both of these guns. And again, I don't get into how many lines per inch, I just get into whether or not they work. And on these guns, they do work. I haven't had any problem with it without gloves in gripping the guns. And again, it's nice to see a checkered front strap on these. These are slightly more expensive than the Ruger that we checked out in part 2 of the series here, that did not have any checkering on the front, but not much more expensive. I sure wish Ruger would have checkered theirs also, but that's probably saved a few dollars in the production there. The back straps checkered on the Fastback, and the mainspring housing is appropriately snakeskin pattern also on the Scorpion to match the grips. Again, these are very grippy, and I like the feel on both of them. One thing that does concern me a little bit about Sigs, though, their slide profile. You can see that it's got a typical Sig squared off, or almost squared off top end instead of as rounded as you'll see on many of the other 1911s or the typical John Browning design. That has presented a problem in finding holsters for these guns. I've had to have custom-made Kydex holsters for both of these guns. They just don't fit in leather or any other 1911 Kydex holster I have. Of course, the Sig with the rail makes it a little more difficult, but that slide profile is definitely something that you want to consider when selecting a Sig 1911. Both of these guns have 3-dot sights. They are illuminated. It's nice to have night sights again for this price range. I normally don't get into the statistics on these things other than weight, but I will mention here that the front sight on both of these is measures out at 0.141 inches. And that's fine in and of itself, but the back sight is what concerns me. On the Scorpion, now they look the same in the video here, but on the Scorpion, the rear sight measures out at 0.125, and on the Fastback it measures out at 0.118. And that means there's very little contrast. I don't know if you can see it here in the video or not, but there's very little sight definition between the front and the rear sight. Now that's great for precision sighting. That's not real great for quick sight acquisition. I would like a wider rear notch in there. Now, as far as weight, I've carried each of these guns for a full day on the range, as I have mentioned, and I've carried the Fastback concealed, but both are heavy steel frame guns, and for some folks they may be a little better suited carrying in a shoulder holster than in a belt holster. Scorpion weighs out at 2 pounds 14.8 ounces. For simplification, that's 46.8 ounces. The Fastback comes in at 13.6, 2 pounds 13.6 ounces, or 45.6 ounces, so it's a hair less than the Scorpion. That makes the Fastback about the same weight as the Springfield mil-spec, but a couple ounces heavier than the Colt Government that we reviewed in part 1 of this series, and it comes in right between the Ruger SR 1911 and the Smith E-series that we reviewed in part 2. So how do these guns shoot? Well, I'll let the video speak for itself. At 15 yards, using a Remington 230 grain ball in each of these guns, the Scorpion shoots phenomenally well. It groups just beautifully. The Fastback groups just a little bit looser, but it's still, both of them are sighted right on. Now, they do have adjustable or drift adjustable sights. They're not adjustable for elevation, only for windage. But at 15 yards, I love the way these guns shoot. And even at plates all the way out to 50 yards, as long as I do my part, these guns will certainly do their part. They're great shooters, even with that little bit of creep in the trigger, and even with those sights that are more designed for precision. As long as I take my time, they're fine. Now, I'm not sure how these would work. If I tried to run a quick plate rack with it, I haven't tried it with either one. Again, I'd want a wider rear sight notch for that. So what about price? Sig doesn't list manufacturer suggested retail prices on their website, at least not that I've been able to find, but both guns fall right in the middle of our mid-range affordable bracket. I found a new Scorpion with a straight trigger going for $1,000 plus shipping, and a pre-owned one also with a straight trigger for $829 plus shipping on Gunbroker. Now, Sig no longer has the Nitron Fastback on their website. They do have a similar Fastback Nightmare listed, but again, without any manufacturer suggested retail price. The full-size Nightmare Fastback is going on the auction sites for around $1,000 plus shipping, new, and occasionally one has popped up for around $800 used. So what do I think about Sig's entry into the 1911 market? Well, both of my Sigs are more than accurate enough for defense out to 50 yards. Both have been utterly reliable. Both are made with a Series 80 style firing pin block, which some people like, some people may not like. But I haven't had any issues with either guns, and the triggers, particularly on the well-used Scorpion, are as good as I could ask for, although it would be nice if they had just a little less creep in it. And the external extractors, I don't care what the purists say, I haven't had any problems with those. So what about pros and cons? Well, for pros, they're well made, they're reliable, they're accurate. They have nice consistent weight triggers. I like the fact that for this price bracket they come with night sights, and they're made in America with American parts. And they're certainly good values. Both of these guns are good values for mid-range 1911 pricing. On the con side is the slide profile. Again, I just don't like that Sig slide profile for holster fitting, but once you got a holster for it, it's a non-issue. I really don't like that narrow rear sight notch. As I mentioned, I'd like a wider notch on there for quicker sight acquisition, but again, for accurate shooting, that sight notch is fine. I mentioned the take up and the creep on the triggers. Not the best 1911 triggers, but also quite far from the worst 1911 triggers. And some will say the external extractor is a problem. Again, never ever had a problem with it. And finally, some would complain that SIGs are, even though they're made in America, they're not from an American-owned company. Overall, I wouldn't hesitate to stake my life on either of these guns, and I think that they're both good values for the price, particularly if you can find a good used one. Next week, we're going to wrap up the full-size 45 series of the great affordable 1911 series by comparing two bargain basement 45s, and then we'll go into several comparisons of full-size 1911 in 9mm. So please subscribe. Click on the notifications bell so you won't miss out on any of the new videos from Riders Range. Like and subscribe, and the thumbs up are always appreciated. And also for a listing of all the guns that we'll be comparing in upcoming videos. And we're going to be comparing commander size all the way down to the ultra compact in 9s and 45s, and we're even tossing in a couple of 40s in there. So to find out what's going to be coming up, check out the website at ridersrange.com, and your comments, your suggestions are appreciated. And once again, thank you for visiting Riders Range.
Well, let's see if we can reset that white plate again from here. Or not.